Steve Harvey had been hosting Family Feud for over 19 years, and throughout that extensive tenure, he had witnessed an extraordinary range of human behavior and interpersonal dynamics unfold on his stage. From contestants who delivered responses that challenged comprehension to families who displayed profound moments of mutual support and genuine affection, he believed he had encountered every conceivable scenario that could transpire during a live television taping. However, on a Thursday afternoon in April 2025, something occurred that would test his patience in ways few previous incidents had, demonstrate the critical importance of defending dignity when it is under attack, and ultimately provide a powerful lesson about the insidious nature of verbal abuse disguised as humor or honesty. The Parker family from Denver, Colorado stood ready to compete against the Martinez family from San Antonio, Texas, and what commenced as a routine game show taping would transform into a moment of moral clarity about respect, cruelty, and the responsibility we have to defend those who are being demeaned. If you appreciate stories about standing up against cruelty, defending the dignity of those who are being attacked, and the importance of treating your spouse with respect and kindness rather than contempt and criticism, please take a moment to engage with this content by selecting the like option and subscribing to our channel for additional powerful narratives that illuminate the critical importance of respect and compassion in marriage and family relationships. The Parker family consisted of Brian Parker, a 41-year-old sales manager for a commercial real estate firm, his wife of 13 years, Nicole, who was 39, their son Tyler at 11 years old, Brian's cousin Stephen at 38, and Stephen's wife Michelle at 37. The family had applied to appear on Family Feud after Brian suggested it as an entertaining activity that would give them an opportunity to win money and appear on television, something he viewed as an achievement that would impress his colleagues and social circle. Nicole had been hesitant initially, expressing concern about being on camera and suggesting that perhaps they should choose a different family activity, but Brian had dismissed her concerns and insisted they proceed with the application. Nicole Parker was a dedicated elementary school art teacher who had devoted 13 years to building what she believed was a stable marriage despite increasing signs that her husband viewed her with something approaching contempt. She had met Brian when they were both in their mid-20s, and she had been attracted to his confidence, his professional ambition, and his apparent affection for her. They had married after a courtship of 2 years, and Nicole had supported Brian through several career transitions while establishing her own fulfilling career teaching children to express themselves through artistic creation and maintaining their household with exceptional care and attention. What Nicole had not fully acknowledged until the past several years was that Brian had developed a pattern of making disparaging comments about her appearance, her career, and her worth as a person. These comments had started subtly several years into their marriage. Small criticisms about her clothing choices or suggestions that she should exercise more or style her hair differently. Over time, the comments had become more frequent and more cruel, with Brian frequently comparing Nicole unfavorably to other women, commenting negatively on her weight fluctuations, and making jokes at her expense in front of friends and family that left her feeling humiliated and worthless. Brian's criticism of Nicole's appearance had intensified significantly in the weeks leading up to their Family Feud appearance. When Nicole had expressed nervousness about being on camera, Brian had responded with comments about her needing to wear extra makeup to look acceptable on television, suggestions that she should lose weight before the taping, and jokes about hoping the camera would be kind to her. Nicole had tried to laugh along with these comments, telling herself that Brian was just being funny or that he was trying to motivate her to look her best. But the cumulative effect of years of such remarks had eroded her self-esteem to the point where she genuinely believed she was unattractive and unworthy of respect. On the morning of the Family Feud taping, Nicole had taken exceptional care with her appearance, waking up early to style her hair carefully, applying makeup with more attention than usual, and selecting an outfit that she hoped would look flattering on camera while also meeting Brian's critical standards. When she had presented herself to Brian before leaving for the studio, he had looked her up and down with an expression of assessment rather than appreciation, and had said nothing positive, instead commenting that at least she had tried even if the results were mediocre. Nicole had felt her confidence crumble further, but had said nothing, having learned over years that objecting to Brian's criticism only led to him accusing her of being too sensitive or unable to take a joke. The game had progressed through several rounds with Nicole participating, but appearing increasingly uncomfortable and self-conscious. She frequently touched her hair and adjusted her clothing, clear signs of insecurity about her appearance. Brian had been animated and competitive, clearly enjoying the experience of being on television and the attention that came with it. However, several times during breaks in taping, production staff had noticed Brian making comments to Nicole that caused her to look hurt or embarrassed, though the content of these remarks had not been clearly audible. Then came the moment that would expose the casual cruelty that Brian had been inflicting on his wife, and that would trigger one of Steve Harvey's most direct and forceful interventions in defense of basic human dignity. During a transition between rounds, while cameras were still recording, but before the next question was to be asked, Brian leaned over to his cousin Stephen and made a comment that he apparently believed would not be picked up by the microphones. However, the lapel microphones that all contestants wore captured his words with perfect clarity, and those words were heard not only by the production crew, but also by Steve Harvey through his earpiece. Brian said to Stephen, in a tone that combined mockery and genuine criticism, "I told Nicole she was too ugly for TV, but she insisted on doing this anyway. I guess we will see if the cameras can make her look halfway decent." He laughed as if he had made an amusing observation rather than delivered a devastating insult about his wife, who was standing less than 3 feet away from him and who had clearly heard every word. Nicole's face registered the impact of the comment immediately, her expression shifting from nervous anticipation to profound hurt and humiliation. Steve Harvey's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. His face, which had been displaying his usual jovial hosting expression, transformed completely. His smile disappeared, his jaw tightened, and his eyes narrowed with an anger that was rarely visible during his typically light-hearted show. He walked directly toward Brian with purposeful strides that conveyed serious intent, and when he reached the family podium, he addressed Brian with a voice that was controlled but unmistakably furious. "Hold on. Stop everything right now. Brian, I need you to repeat what you just said to your cousin about your wife." Brian's confident expression faltered as he realized that his supposedly private comment had been overheard. He attempted to deflect with an uncomfortable laugh. "Oh, that was just a joke between cousins. I was just kidding around." Steve's response cut through the attempted minimization with absolute clarity. "No, you were not kidding around. You told your cousin that you told your wife she was too ugly for TV. That is not a joke. That is cruelty." The studio audience, which had been enjoying the game up to that point, went completely silent. The shift in atmosphere was immediate and profound, as hundreds of people recognized they were witnessing something serious rather than entertaining. Steve continued without giving Brian an opportunity to construct additional excuses or rationalizations. "I have been hosting this show for 19 years, and I have seen a lot of things, but I have never heard a husband talk about his wife the way you just did. That woman standing next to you, that is your wife. That is the woman you chose to marry. That is the mother of your child, and you just told someone that she is too ugly for television." Brian attempted to defend himself, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "Look, I'm just being honest. Nicole knows she is not the most attractive woman. I have always been honest with her about her appearance because I think honesty is important in marriage." The statement revealed so much about Brian's distorted understanding of relationships and respect that Steve's response was immediate and devastating. "Honesty? You think telling your wife she is ugly is honesty? Let me tell you what that actually is. That is abuse. That is a man systematically destroying his wife's self-esteem so he can feel superior. That is not honesty. That is cruelty disguised as truth-telling." Steve turned to Nicole, who was standing at the family podium with tears streaming down her face, her arms wrapped around herself in a protective posture that spoke of years of similar verbal attacks. His voice softened considerably when he addressed her. "Nicole, I need you to come over here and sit down." He gestured to a chair that a production assistant had brought onto the stage. Nicole walked over slowly, her son Tyler immediately moving to stay close to his mother, his young face showing distress at seeing her so upset. Steve knelt beside Nicole's chair so they were at eye level, and he spoke to her with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the anger he had directed at Brian moments before. "Nicole, I want you to hear me very clearly. You are not ugly. You are not too ugly for television or too ugly for anything else. You are a beautiful woman who has been married to a man who has spent years trying to convince you otherwise so he can control you and make himself feel better about his own inadequacies." Nicole tried to speak through her tears. "But Brian is just being honest. I know I am not attractive. I have gained weight over the years, and I do not dress as well as other women, and I have never been the kind of woman who turns heads. Brian is just telling me the truth that other people are too polite to say. The statement broke Steve's heart visibly, and his response reflected both compassion for Nicole and fury at what Brian had done to her sense of self-worth over their 13 years of marriage. Nicole, listen to me. The fact that you believe what you just said tells me that Brian has been doing this to you for a long time. He has been criticizing you and putting you down and making you feel worthless until you started to believe it yourself. That is what abusers do. They do not hit you or yell at you necessarily. They just slowly erode your sense of worth through constant criticism until you accept their assessment of you as truth. Steve stood and turned back to Brian with an expression of barely controlled anger. Brian, I am going to tell you exactly what is going to happen right now. You are going to apologize to your wife. Not because I am making you, though I am, but because you owe her an apology for what you just said and for apparently years of similar comments. And this apology is going to be genuine and specific, acknowledging what you said and why it was wrong, or we are not continuing with this game, and you and your family are going to leave this studio. The directness of Steve's ultimatum left no room for negotiation or deflection. Brian looked around as if hoping for support or escape, but he found neither. His cousin Stephen was staring at him with an expression of disgust and disappointment. Stephen's wife, Michelle, had moved away from Brian as if his behavior was contagious. The studio audience was clearly on Steve and Nicole's side, many people visibly upset and angry at what they had witnessed. Brian recognized that he had no choice and no allies, and he approached Nicole with visible reluctance. Nicole, I apologize for what I said. I should not have said you were too ugly for TV. The apology was perfunctory and minimalist, clearly designed to satisfy the requirement without genuine contrition or understanding. Steve's response was immediate. No, that is not good enough. Try again and this time actually acknowledge what you did and why it was wrong. This is your wife, Brian. The woman you have been married to for 13 years. She deserves better than that pathetic excuse for an apology. Brian took a breath, clearly frustrated at being forced to engage more genuinely with the situation. Nicole, I apologize for saying you were too ugly for TV. That was a cruel thing to say, and I should not have said it, especially where other people could hear it. Steve shook his head with visible exasperation. Especially where other people could hear it. So you are saying it would have been fine to say it privately, that the problem was not the cruelty of the statement, but the fact that you got caught saying it in front of others. Brian recognized he had revealed more than he intended and attempted to correct course. No, I mean I should not have said it at all. It was wrong to say regardless of who was listening. Steve pressed further. And why was it wrong, Brian? I need you to actually understand and articulate why what you said was harmful. Brian struggled visibly to construct a response that would satisfy the requirement while not fully acknowledging the depth of his pattern of abuse. It was wrong because it hurt Nicole's feelings, and because a husband should not say things that make his wife feel bad about herself. The response was closer to what Steve was demanding, though it still framed the harm in terms of hurt feelings rather than systematic emotional abuse. Steve decided that this was likely the best he would get from Brian in this moment, and turned his attention back to Nicole, recognizing that her healing and empowerment were more important than extracting a perfect apology from someone who clearly did not fully understand or accept the wrongness of his behavior. Nicole, I want you to understand something. What Brian just said, calling you too ugly for television, that was not an isolated comment. Based on how you reacted and what you said about believing you are unattractive, I am guessing he has been saying things like this to you for years. Am I right? Nicole nodded slowly, fresh tears forming. Yes. He makes comments about my appearance all the time. He compares me to other women. He suggests I need to lose weight or dress better or fix my hair. He jokes about my looks in front of our friends. I have just learned to accept it because I thought he was trying to help me improve. Steve's expression combined sadness and determination. Nicole, he is not trying to help you improve. He is trying to control you and diminish you. When someone who claims to love you spends years telling you that you are not good enough, not attractive enough, not worthy enough, they are not helping you. They are abusing you, and you deserve so much better than that. He turned to address the studio audience and the cameras directly. Ladies and gentlemen, I want everyone watching this to understand something important. What we just witnessed is not unusual. There are millions of people in relationships where their partner systematically undermines their self-esteem through criticism disguised as honesty or humor. This is emotional abuse, and it is just as damaging as physical abuse, even though it does not leave visible scars. If you are in a relationship where your partner constantly criticizes your appearance, your intelligence, your worth, where they make you feel like you are lucky they chose to be with you despite your many inadequacies, you are being abused. Steve continued with passion and conviction. And if you are someone who treats your partner this way, who thinks honesty means telling them all their flaws and shortcomings, who believes that criticism will motivate them to improve, you need to understand that you are not being helpful or honest. You are being cruel and abusive. Real love builds people up. Real love makes your partner feel valued and cherished and worthy. Real love does not require you to destroy someone's sense of self-worth to maintain control over them. He turned back to Brian one final time. Brian, I do not know if you are capable of understanding what you have done to your wife or if you are capable of changing your behavior. But I know this. If you continue treating Nicole the way you apparently have been, you are going to lose her. And when you do, it will not be because she was not good enough for you. It will be because you were not good enough for her. The studio audience erupted in applause, clearly supporting Steve's assessment and deeply sympathetic to Nicole. Steve made a decision about how to proceed. We are going to take a break from this game. Nicole, I want you and Tyler to go backstage where you can have some privacy and collect yourself. There are people there who can support you and help you think through what you want to do next. Brian, you are going to stay out here with me for a few minutes because we need to have a conversation. Nicole stood with Tyler's help and walked off stage, her son staying protectively close to her side. Once Nicole and Tyler were out of sight, Steve addressed Brian with absolute directness and without the performative elements of his hosting persona. Brian, I am going to tell you something man to man. What you have been doing to your wife is destroying her and destroying your marriage. You may think you are being honest or that you are trying to motivate her to improve, but what you are actually doing is systematically crushing her spirit and making her believe she has no value. That is not what a man does to someone he loves. That is what an insecure, controlling person does to maintain power over someone. Brian attempted to defend himself. You do not understand our relationship. Nicole is sensitive and she takes things too personally. I'm just trying to help her be the best version of herself. Steve's response was swift and uncompromising. No, Brian, you do not get to blame Nicole for being hurt by your cruelty. You do not get to frame your abuse as helpful honesty. What you are doing is wrong, and the fact that you cannot acknowledge that tells me you have a fundamental problem with empathy and respect. Steve continued. I am going to suggest something to you, though I suspect you will not take the advice. You need to get professional help to understand why you feel the need to tear down your wife instead of building her up. You need to examine why you believe that making her feel worthless serves any legitimate purpose. And you need to give Nicole the freedom and support to decide whether she wants to continue being married to someone who treats her this way. The episode never aired. Steve Harvey personally ensured that all footage was permanently destroyed, recognizing that broadcasting Nicole's humiliation and the exposure of Brian's verbal abuse would only compound the harm that had already been inflicted. The production company reached out to Nicole through a separate contact to confirm that the footage would never be seen publicly, and to offer resources including contacts for therapists who specialized in helping people recover from emotionally abusive relationships. Nicole made the decision to pursue separation from Brian within a month of the Family Feud incident. The public nature of Brian's comment, combined with Steve Harvey's clear articulation of what had been happening to her for years, had created a clarity that Nicole could not ignore. She recognized that she had been accepting unacceptable treatment, and that her son Tyler was learning from Brian's example that it was acceptable for men to demean and control their partners through constant criticism. The separation was difficult, but Nicole found support through friends who had witnessed Brian's treatment of her over the years and who validated that Steve Harvey's assessment had been accurate. Brian initially responded to the separation with anger and blame, accusing Nicole of overreacting to a simple joke and claiming that Steve Harvey had manipulated her into leaving their marriage. However, when his cousin Stephen and several other family members made clear that they supported Nicole's decision and that they had been concerned about Brian's treatment of her for years, he began to recognize that his behavior was being viewed by everyone as problematic rather than normal or acceptable. He eventually entered individual therapy, though whether he would develop genuine insight into his patterns or would simply learn to disguise them more effectively remained an open question. Tyler struggled with his parents' separation, but ultimately benefited from seeing his mother choose self-respect over maintaining a harmful relationship. Nicole worked with a therapist to help Tyler understand in age-appropriate terms that sometimes parents need to live separately when one is treating the other in ways that are not healthy or kind. She also ensured that Tyler understood that loving someone does not mean accepting cruel treatment from them, and that relationships should make people feel valued rather than worthless. Approximately 1 year after the Family Feud incident, Nicole received a call from Steve Harvey's office asking if she would be willing to meet with him. She agreed, feeling profound gratitude for his intervention and curious about what he might want to discuss. They met at a quiet location where they could talk without interruption. Steve's opening words acknowledged the courage Nicole had demonstrated. "I wanted to check in and see how you are doing. What happened that day on our stage, having your husband's cruelty exposed so publicly, that could have destroyed you. But I am hoping that maybe it freed you instead." Nicole smiled, a genuine smile that Steve had not seen during their previous encounter. "It did free me, Mr. Harvey. Hearing you say that what Brian was doing was abuse, that was the first time anyone had named it so clearly. I had been telling myself for years that I was just being too sensitive, that Brian was being honest, that I should appreciate his feedback even when it hurt. But you made me see that constant criticism designed to make someone feel worthless is not honesty or help. It is abuse, and I did not have to accept it." They talked for over an hour about healing from emotional abuse, rebuilding self-esteem after years of systematic criticism, and the process of learning to trust your own judgment about what treatment is acceptable. Steve shared observations from his extensive experience counseling people through relationship challenges and offered perspective that Nicole found valuable and affirming. When their conversation concluded, Steve told her something that resonated deeply. "You are beautiful, Nicole. Not because of how you look, though you are an attractive woman despite what Brian spent years trying to convince you. You are beautiful because of your strength, your dedication to your son, your commitment to teaching children, and your courage in choosing self-respect over comfortable misery." 2 years after the Family Feud revelation, Nicole had constructed a new life defined by self-respect, authentic relationships, and a reclaimed sense of her own worth. She continued teaching elementary school art, finding renewed purpose in helping children express themselves creatively, and in modeling for them that adults deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. She had also become an informal mentor to other women who were recovering from emotionally abusive relationships, sharing her experience and helping them recognize that constant criticism is not love or honesty, but rather a tactic of control and diminishment. This story offers profound lessons about emotional abuse, the responsibility to defend those being demeaned, and the importance of recognizing that cruelty disguised as honesty remains cruelty. Nicole Parker taught us that accepting years of criticism and demeaning treatment does not make us weak, but rather demonstrates the human capacity to adapt to and normalize harmful situations. She showed us that recognizing abuse and choosing to leave requires tremendous courage, and that sometimes having someone else name what is happening to us provides the clarity we need to take action. Brian Parker taught us through his harmful choices that viewing your spouse with contempt, believing that constant criticism serves any constructive purpose, and prioritizing control over genuine partnership destroys relationships and damages the people we claim to love. His public comment revealed patterns that had existed privately for years and demonstrated how people can convince themselves that abuse is actually honesty or motivation. Steve Harvey demonstrated that authentic leadership requires calling out cruelty immediately when it occurs, defending those who are being demeaned even when it disrupts entertainment, and articulating clearly why certain behaviors are abusive rather than allowing them to be minimized as jokes or honesty. His intervention ensured that Nicole did not face her husband's public insult alone, and that the studio audience understood they were witnessing abuse rather than acceptable marital banter. If you found this narrative meaningful and believe in the critical importance of treating your spouse with respect rather than contempt, recognizing emotional abuse disguised as honesty, and having the courage to defend those who are being demeaned, please engage with this content through the available channels and consider sharing it with others who might benefit from understanding these dynamics. The story serves as a reminder that words carry tremendous power to wound or heal, that constant criticism designed to diminish someone is abuse regardless of whether it is delivered with a smile, and that sometimes our worst moments of public exposure become the catalyst for necessary change and eventual liberation from situations that were slowly destroying our sense of worth and dignity. Today, Nicole occasionally reflects on that Thursday afternoon at the Family Feud studio. The memory remains complex, representing both one of the most humiliating moments of her life when her husband's cruelty was exposed publicly, and the beginning of her journey toward reclaiming her self-respect and building a life free from constant criticism and demeaning treatment. She learned that Brian's assessment of her as unattractive had been rooted in his need to control her rather than in any objective reality. That the years of criticism had been designed to make her grateful for his presence rather than to help her improve. And that Steve Harvey's intervention had provided both validation that she was experiencing abuse and permission to choose differently for her future. The Family Feud stage became an unlikely location where systematic emotional abuse was exposed and challenged, proving that sometimes having someone with authority and platform clearly name what is happening to us provides the catalyst we need to recognize that we deserve better treatment than we have been accepting.